Hello and welcome to the ASEF podcast. I'm Frank Dragar, ASEF Fellow 2023 and a student of Artificial Intelligence at Utrecht University, an alumni of University of Ljubljana where I study computer science and mathematics. I'm the host of the vertical on business and technology. In this series of podcasts, we'll explore how businesses leverage innovative technology, their impacts on society, and related topics. Today, we'll be diving into the topic of youth entrepreneurship, discussing the ecosystem in Slovenia, comparison to other countries, and resources available to those interested in pursuing their own ventures. I'm delighted to welcome three guests. Danijela Pavlica, the head of educational content at POPRI from Primorska Technology Park, Jakob Gajšek, director of LUI, Ljubljana University Incubator, and Charlotte Taft, the education coordinator at the US Embassy in Ljubljana. Please let us know a little bit more about yourselves.
Yes, hello, and thanks once again for the invitation. As you said, I'm Danijela, coming from Primorska Technology Park, and at our technology park, we are based on startups, so we have our own incubator, and the other thing that we are focusing on, it's the national competition in the best entrepreneurial idea, that it's called POPRI. So that's kind of stuff that I'm in charge of. My career background, let's say so, it's mostly in sales and marketing.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm Jakob. So I'm sitting in this corner waving the flag of startups and really kind of venture-oriented startups, meaning really globally ambitious companies that really want to go, international from day zero. My background is in engineering. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, though I'm a crap engineer. I've never done it. So I do like to think I can understand the engineering mindset. And, I've started in the ABC Accelerator in 2015, LUI in 2018. And we're aiming to build a place where very, very ambitious people can make their first steps.
Hi. My name is Charlotte Taft. I work at the US Embassy. I've lived in Slovenia for a very long time, since about the 1990s when I first came to Slovenia to do a Fulbright scholarship. I work at the US Embassy, and I started a program which was originally called the Summer Economics Institute, and we've now changed it into the Student Entrepreneurship and Internship Program, which really more reflects what it is. We do it together with AmCham. And basically it was to give students the tools to make their ideas reality. And it was really to encourage entrepreneurship in a very hands-on way.
Great, thank you. So, diving into the topic, what is youth entrepreneurship? How is it different from entrepreneurship in general? What are the goals? Why is it important?
Okay, thanks. I'm happy to take on the first topic. Basically, when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk more generally about just starting new ventures. When we talk about startups and things like that, we tend to put a slightly different emphasis, and it tends to be more what Jakob's talking about, more innovative and so on, and scalable, things that have the potential to have a global reach. So it kind of depends a little bit how we define the topic. So we can divide it more broadly, which can be anything from a bakery to Google. But when we're talking about it, particularly within the context that I'm talking about and Jakob's talking about, and probably Danijela, we're probably talking about a slightly narrower definition. That's the first thing. The second thing is when we're talking about youth entrepreneurship, it can be anything really from what Danijela is talking about, from just introducing the basic ideas that business is a cool thing. It's something you can do. It's an option at the early stages. And then when you get to programs like mine, and then later on into programs like Jakob's, what we're talking about with youth is taking students and saying, this is an option, and how do you do it if you have a great idea and something that could be innovative? How do you make that into a reality, and why is that important? And why is that important is because, and many of the data will show this, is that it's important also for economic development. But beyond just economic development and making money, which of course is a good thing, creates jobs and all those kinds of important things, it's also important to solve some of the problems that we're facing today. We're going to need innovative people. We're going to need people that have these kinds of backgrounds to solve the kind of problems that are up and coming, and that's everything from green technologies to solve climate issues and so on. And we need to have to plant that idea in younger people and let them run with it and give them the options and the incentives and the correct environment to do that.
Thank you, Charlotte. So, what is the state of youth entrepreneurship in Slovenia? Maybe Danijela, you can talk a little bit about it.
Yes, as I've mentioned before, basically our technology park is in charge of the national competition of the best entrepreneur idea. But as you were asking about youth entrepreneurship, it's I think that the process starts already in elementary school. It's not that I can say that you have to tell them to speak about entrepreneurship, but it's mostly in the approach of letting them know that they have the option, as my colleague mentioned before. So what we're trying to do, due to we are also in charge of the entrepreneurial part, let's say entrepreneurial part of this topic, it's that we give them the chance to try some skills like teamwork, like speaking in front of a big audience and so on. I think that that's the start of what you should do. So you have to give them the chance already in the elementary school. And then you just keep going on in the high school and in university.
So talking about university, maybe Jakob, you can continue with university level.
Yeah, I think when talking about youth entrepreneurship, the very important thing to mention is that it's a really great time to give it a shot, because when, if not when you're young, can you have so much freedom, so little depending on you that you can essentially risk, and this risk is very reasonable, and you're not putting anybody else. The worst thing that can happen is you end up with a ton of experience and looking for a regular kind of job. And I think that's a really, really important kind of moment, because let's say at university, like I mentioned, there are so many opportunities. You're starting to get to know a field, an industry, if you will. And a lot of these can have opportunities hidden inside of them. And that's why, quite a lot is happening in terms of supporting this and giving people a chance to explore these opportunities and so on. And university is, often seen as the time to find yourself, and also the decision in which way you're taking your career is one of the biggest ones that you take in life, right? And so this is certainly one thing that is worth at least exploring, at least seeing, is this for me, right? And this is why youth entrepreneurship, because then you can try it without really risking anybody else's existence, and because you have time and you're starting to learn about certain fields, is a really great time. And because the best thing you can do when you're talking to potential clients or whatever is saying, well, I'm a student, I'm doing this for university, and anybody will talk to you. So it's just kind of practical to see and explore, right?
Thank you. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, while nearly half of young people show interest in entrepreneurship, only 4.7% in the EU and 7.4% in the OECD nations actively pursued starting a business between 2014 and 2018. The same study indicates that while the EU average for young entrepreneurs expecting their ventures to generate a minimum of 19 jobs within the next 5 years stands at around 10%, Slovenia's expectations are slightly lower at 8%. This suggests a more cautious outlook among Slovenian young entrepreneurs regarding their initiatives. So why is student entrepreneurship or youth entrepreneurship not better developed in Slovenia?
Well, I think it's because it's not really it's not the people's first thought, what will be my career, what will I do? It's not present in the kind of joint subconscious. And I think that's a big reason why there's perhaps a little bit less, because people just don't know. Like Charlotte said earlier, it's all about giving people an opportunity to see that this is an actual option that you can do, and this is a good kind of career. It's not for everybody, absolutely not. It's not our goal to convince everybody to be entrepreneurs, but at the very least, everybody should be entrepreneurial, but still, it's something that's worth exploring. And I don't entirely agree with you that it's not that supported. I think there's quite a lot of support in Slovenia, right? From all sorts of different kind of directions.
I'd just like to add something. The program that I do in the summers, we do together with AmCham Slovenia. And it's a bit of a division of labor. The July program that I do has a lean startup component, and then it's show them the ecosystem and all the people that can help them within it. So we take 20 students, university students who might be interested. And they're not just from science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine. We take about half from there, and we take another half from other fields. And it can be law, it can be design, it can be whatever. And what I think is interesting about working with AmCham is that we say, okay, and AmCham will give you an internship as well, because, startups will eventually grow up, hopefully, and become, big corporations and larger things and so on. So you should have experience in what I call real business as well. And that's a good thing about working with AmCham. It also shows people, maybe you were interested in startups, but also give this other world a try, because maybe business is your thing, but maybe startups are not your thing. And it's always good to give people, as we were talking about, and I think we're all talking about this, is giving people options and putting it on the table as an option. It's not just becoming lawyers and doctors and successful engineers and, great, journalists or whatever. There are other options as well, and they're also very important.
If I can add something, I think that it is an option in Slovenia, as you, Jakob, said. But I think that maybe we should do it more systematically. Already starting it in elementary school, but more systematically. That's also one topic that we are really focusing on it, because the Ministry of Tourism, Sports and Economics does focus on that. With some, let's say, specific donations, like for schools, but they have to apply, and with the help of incubators, or they can do it also by themselves, they can speak or teach to pupils some entrepreneurial, let's say, skills. Yeah, most of them are focusing on lean up methodology, and they also do like Canvas, startup weekends, and so on. But I think that we have to give them, let's say, to the teachers, we have to give the teachers the skills and the opportunity to get to know the entrepreneurial mindset, and then they will start already doing it in elementary school, and just going on, as I said before, later on in the high school, and then at university and so on. Yeah.
At that point, I think it's really important that we know that we don't expect people from primary school to become entrepreneurs immediately, but it is about inspiring them, about inspiration, about kind of planting that thought in their mind. And here, we have all sorts of competitions in primary school for, Pregel Award for chemistry and mathematics and I don't know what. And you have POPRI for entrepreneurship, for, a good business idea. And I think that's wonderful. It's giving people an opportunity. It's just something that should be more omnipresent, and it should be something that's part of the character of, everybody deciding that even if they don't decide to go into POPRI, they should just at least make that decision whether to go or not, right? That means that they understand that it exists and what it is, and make a decision based on data rather than lack of data.
I think maybe the best value of this competition is that, as you mentioned before, a lot of ideas are good, but none of them have the potential to go on market. That's maybe why is it so special, even for me, because as I do a lot of workshop with the ones that go to elementary school and high school, I see in them like a potential. If I can tell you a short story, we had like a startup weekend last year, and it was my first one that when I've joined the Primorska Technology Park, and I had high school students that were coming from artistic gymnasium, basically. And I was like, how will we do it? And how will we teach them what's entrepreneurship, how can you make an idea that has a business potential and so on. And then we gave them some pencils, some material that was closer to them, and then they've started. At the end of the startup weekend, I was like, as you see me, I was so excited because they made such great ideas, because we told them how do they do it and how can they make something from their problem, let's say, to make it like a business idea. And I was super excited, and also they were. Yeah.
I think entrepreneurship is not just limited to what we think of as being a scientific endeavor or perhaps an IT endeavor, people writing software and so on. And we see that at SEI every year. As I said, we take people from, yes, science, technology, engineering, math, medicine. Yes, we take half of those, but we also take people from design, from law, from other topics. And what you see is also there's a bit of magic in combining these people as well. Because in a real startup, as Jakob and I perhaps know more or have seen more, is that in a real startup, you're going to have a financial guy, you're going to have a lawyer, you're going to have a technical person, you're going to have an artistic person to make sure everything looks good, maybe an industrial designer, something like that. So all of these things out there in the real world are coming together. And maybe that's also where the university system in Europe is different than the university system in the United States. You tend to focus on one topic. You go and you just study engineering, or you just study economics, or you just study medicine, whichever. In the United States, we have a so-called liberal arts type of education where you can take a lot of different things. I got to take a lot of different things. Lucky me. And I think that also means that we tend to be more at home with combining with other people, and that in the real world is also important. And also recognizing that artistic and creative people also have this potential in them as well, and even just as such, but also as part of the whole team.
We've mentioned a little bit on the entrepreneurial mindset. So especially in youth entrepreneurship, it's about education, it's about fostering a certain kind of mentality. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The core of it, in what I've seen, is ambition. Because quite often it's said that, entrepreneurs mainly come from families of entrepreneurs. I don't entirely agree with that. It's more that entrepreneurs come from backgrounds which encourage being ambitious. So even if, we can't change what happens in homes, however, we can influence what happens in education and in schools like Danijela is doing, and at university like we're doing, and kind of connecting everything to that like Charlotte is. And I think that's a critical part of then actually getting people to take the leap, so to say, is saying, okay, well, I want to do something impactful. That decision, that moment of realization is really, really, really important in becoming an entrepreneur.
I would also say that there's an aspect of risk, and this translates through the entire process. If you become a doctor and then you go and work at Klinični Center, you start at the medical faculty, you just keep going. And it's very nice, and it's, where you're going, what's going to happen next, and you can keep going, and then if you want, you can open your own, office or whatever. It's fine. In starting a business, there is a degree of risk, and it's not simply ambition. There also has to be an understanding of risk, and that you're willing to take that risk. And as Jakob said, when you're young, that risk is not as terrible, because you're not going to affect other people, because usually you're single at the time and you don't have small children or a house or a mortgage or all these other things which will burden you later in time. So the risk is less at the time. So it's also, I think, a willingness in terms of mindset to take a risk. It's also that the risk is acceptable. And the next point, which usually comes up in the discussion, especially in entrepreneurial circles, is failure. What happens if you fail? And that is also an aspect of mindset or culture to some degree. And one of the few studies have actually said, well, how come Americans are so much more, able to take risk? And the answer is because if you fail, it's not such a big deal. People go, okay, get up, do it again. That's the deal. Whereas in Europe, traditionally, and this was even translated in the financial sense, if you went bankrupt, that was terrible. That was a black mark on you forever. And the whole point being that there has to be an understanding that you will try. Innovation is about experimentation. It's largely trial and error. It's trying, might fail, try again. We all know the Edison quote. What is perspiration? Yeah. So we know that quote, but it's also a risk mentality, I would say, as well, and that you're willing to take that risk, and that you're also willing to fail, and you're willing to get up and do it again. And can we, within Slovenian culture, where failure is not such an acceptable thing, it's not so good. You failed in your business. Oh my gosh. Do I really want to invest in you again? It's like, well, I messed up. It didn't work. Maybe the timing wasn't right. Let's do it again. try again. And that, I think, is also an aspect of mindset in addition to ambition that we have to also foster.
So moving a bit from one shot to try again.
Yeah, and that's the nature of innovation as well. Trial and error.
If I can add something, I do agree with both of you. I would say the third thing would be creativity. So that you're willing to do something that it's maybe new on the market, and also problem solving oriented. So that you basically identify the problem and then you are trying to find the solution.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I do really a lot agree with you because we have a lot of let's say that our competition, it's maybe the first time that already elementary school pupils experience the failure. Yeah, because not every idea that it's done maybe on some workshops and so on does not come to the end, or at least a lot of different ideas when they come to POPRI competition, once they, I don't know, maybe win a prize, or even if they don't, they change the basic idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was why I was talking about creativity. Maybe they try to find out, or they find out that idea was not enough specific, for example, or they have to change the idea so they can fit the market. That's also
exactly
the creativity. Yeah,
this is the product market fit, which is, every topic has its own language. Entrepreneurship and so on has its own language, and this is the product market fit. But it's also, I would say, what we call also the pivot, which is that you came up with one idea and you tried it out, and then you went, ooh, that doesn't really work very well. Part of innovation, trial and error. So you pivot to a new idea, which sounds a lot better than I changed my mind and decided that wasn't going to work. I saw it didn't work. So it's about being able to pivot, which also requires some kind of creativity as well, but it also requires an understanding that didn't work. Now I try something else. I think one major positive aspect of Slovenian character, because I've lived here for a long time, I think is persistence. I think it's good. I think Slovenians have that in themselves, and I think it's a very good quality, particularly for entrepreneurship. So I just wanted to say, I think that Slovenians, even if perhaps, some of these things we're talking about, how could we improve it? I think that's something that exists in Slovenia, and we need to activate the persistence and say, okay, just keep going. If this didn't work, try the next thing. Sorry.
Yeah, kind of to summarize, entrepreneurship is a process. All of these things fit into the process. Yeah. And it's just an understanding kind of in the public that this is just what entrepreneurship is. Mm-hmm. Nobody will chastise a scientist for failing an experiment. Yeah. And it's the same in a startup. It's the same in any kind of entrepreneurial journey. It's like, well, I tried something, it didn't work out. I learned something, and then I'll do it again, better. And then eventually it'll lead me to success.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Now that we have an overview into the matter, let's take a closer look on what is being done about this by various actors in the Slovenian ecosystem. We have an array of organizations, individuals, and various government and private institutions trying to support and bolster the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Slovenia. First on the list are organizations such as incubators, including local ones such as the ones in Sežana, Savinjska, Kranj, and so on, accelerators such as ADC, and various technology parks. One of these organizations is the Ljubljana University Incubator. Jakob, can you tell us a little bit about your role and how incubators support and nurture young entrepreneurs and their startups in early stages?
Yeah, generally speaking, an incubator is a space where you can come to fail. It is designed to help you be a nice environment where everybody kind of understands, or we should understand what you're getting yourselves into, and help you on the journey. We are not there to do things for you. However, we can help you do things better and learn, and maybe not do every single mistake that you can do, right? Maybe, being part of a community, thinking in a similar fashion, having access to mentors and supporters, and, over time also client networks and investment and so on. So this is essentially what an incubator is a field that gives you certain rules. So for us, for instance, when pre-company startups, idea stage or whatever, because there's really nobody too early for us, come in, we give them about 6 months to show whether this makes sense enough. So we open a company, or the entrepreneurs open a company or not. And that's also, kind of providing a bit of structure to the process I mentioned before. And then the fitting inside the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem incubators, in my opinion, should be the first step. They're not necessarily, it's not a rigid process, but it's good to have a bit of a process. And by design, incubators should be the place where you come when you don't have really much to show yet, and they help you build it up a little bit more efficiently than you could have done it on your own, and especially provide motivation and support and a shoulder to cry on sometimes when things don't go exactly as planned, and tell them essentially, well, this is part of the journey, it's okay, right? And being a bit of a space outside of the general sentiment, which is not as pro-entrepreneurship as it could be. It's not super bad, but still kind of having a bit of a shield, like-minded people around you. That's essentially what an incubator is.
Great, thank you. So, like you mentioned, you work with the whole spectrum of young startups. What are the demographics like at your incubator? Is that mostly university students? Is it PhD people?
We get two groups. One are people who haven't done anything else yet in their life. So students mostly finishing or already having just finished their studies. And the other group would be people who have been at it either in science or in business for, a number of years, 5 to 10. Usually they're relatively young, though that's absolutely not a necessity. So those would be kind of the two groups. They differ quite significantly. The students usually come in with, really crazy ideas that most of the time go nowhere. And that's fine. We're designed to help them. We help them with figuring out that the main thing they have to do is go out and talk to people, talk to their clients about, what it is actually that the problem is. And the other group is much more kind of understands the market much better because they've been part of it in one way or another. And then they need a different kind of support. So essentially helping them be faster because they need a little bit less time defining what the actual problem is. So those would be kind of the two main groups that we see. Thank you.
An important role in fostering young entrepreneurs is putting bright young minds to the test at various competitions such as hackathons, pitch competitions, and entrepreneurial workshops. Danijela, can you speak a little bit about your experience on the topic? The Primorska Technology Park organizes POPRI, the International Youth Business Model Competition.
Yes, sure. As I've mentioned before, we do in POPRI competition, we do 3 different categories. The first one it's for elementary schools, so from the 7th till the 9th grade. The second one it's for high school people, and the third one it's for students or young people till 29 years old that do not have established already company that bases on the idea they will present at the competition. And in Slovenia, we are basically the national coordinators, but we do also, or we work as a local, let's say, local motivator or the one that takes care of the activities that lead to the POPRI competition. And in Slovenia, we have 3 other, let's say, official partners of the competition, but we do work with a lot of, let's say, with every Slovenian incubator or company or organization that supports creativity and entrepreneurship. Yeah, but as I said, the official partners are Sasha Incubator from Velenje and Ljubljana Technology Park or Tehnološki park Ljubljana and Razvojni center Novo Mesto. Due to we've figured out that we have to have different partners in Slovenia because we had a lot of people that do come into the POPRI competition. Yeah, so at first you have to write a business model or a business plan, and then you subscribe it to the competition. So that's basically the first stage, and then you come to the, let's say, regional selection that takes place usually in March, and it is in 4 different parts of Slovenia. And later on at the regional competition, you do take a pitch. So you have 5 minutes to tell the people and the members of the jury what's your idea. And later on, the selection is done partly based on the pitch and partly based on the business model. And then you come to the finals that every year happens in Nova Gorica. Yeah.
Great. Talking about educational experience is an important part of a young entrepreneur's journey. Workshops, clubs, and initiatives like Ustvarjalnik and so on teach students about various aspects of entrepreneurship. One of these is also the annual summer entrepreneurship and internship program from AmCham at the US Embassy. Charlotte, could you shed some light on SEI and its impact on young Slovenian talents venturing into the business world?
Sure. First of all, I came up with this idea in 2012, and it was kind of based on a program that I did in high school where we learned about economics. So I kind of modeled it on something that was already there. And I'd like to say that because some of the best ideas and most innovations are built on something that came before, first of all. So that's something to say. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can modify what exists. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, basically the program is this. We do it together with AmCham, as I said before, and the 2 parts of this. AmCham covers the internships with what I call real businesses, so people can get a feeling how real businesses function, also to see if corporate is maybe more their thing. And on the other side, the program that I do is a 2-week July entrepreneurship program. Now, what does that 2-week program entail? Well, we take generally, as I said, about 20 students, half science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine, and half other. And it's a 2-week program. We have a U.S. professor of entrepreneurship who comes here and takes the students through a lean startup program for half the day. The other half of the day, they're with me. And what do I do with them? Basically, I do a few things. One is I try to give them an overview of the economic environment in which they're functioning. Now, why is that? Because you need to know what the environment around you is all about. And that basically involves, we go to the Bank of Slovenia. We learn about monetary policy. We go to UMAR, or IMAD as it's called in English, which is basically the Office for Macroeconomic Analysis and Development, Institute, pardon me. And basically learn about the sort of macroeconomic outlook. We go to the Slovenian Chamber of Commerce, and they tell us what does Slovenia make and do and where does it sell it. So you know the environment that you're operating in, at least vaguely. And that's particularly important for people who don't have a background already in economics and business. And the objective of SEA is not to invite people from economics and business. It's really to give these things to people that don't get those things. So we take a few people from economics and business, but not many. The second point is to say, okay, from a legal aspect, okay, Startup Legal Toolkit. We have a very nice one of my SEI students from many years ago who works for a law firm here in Slovenia, and he comes in and says, here's what you need to start your business from a legal point of view. Then we have the intellectual property. How do you protect your ideas? You got an idea, great. How do you protect it? So these are all tools which we try to give them just in a very basic way so they know what to think about. There's a conceptual framework. We also, of course, have people like Jakob come and say, hey, we're here to help. You got a business idea? We're here. But I also take them to different places all around Slovenia. So we went this year to Ljubljana Incubator. We've been to Catapult, which is next door to Duasoft, down in Trbovlje. We've been to the development center in Novo Mesto as well. So I try to say to them, yes, Ljubljana is wonderful. And there's a lot here for you. But there are also options outside of Ljubljana if you have an idea, people that can help you. So it's not all centered here. So it's also get people out a little bit. So entrepreneurship ecosystem support. And the other part of it, I would say, is showing them different startups that have been relatively successful at varying stages. So this year we went to see Recatalyst, which is obviously a spin-out. It's a very small one, currently based at the National Institute of Chemistry, which has great potential. And on the same day, we also went to see Cozy Lab, an example of something 20 years later, which was a little, I wouldn't say it was a spin-out from Stefan, but in a similar way, it was the next step in the process. And that way you show students, you say, okay, here's some tools, things you need to think about if you're going to start your business. But in addition, here are some people who've done it. Let's listen to what they have to say and hear what they have to tell you. And we have different speakers come over the years with that in mind to say, these are examples. These are people that have done it. And in that sense, you inspire people, which is something we've all been talking about. You say it can be done. It's been done. We also took them in the past to Pipistrel, for example, and to some of the larger companies, which had also been successful over a longer period of time, of course. The other thing I think we should mention is that a lot of what we're offering today is the ability to compress, to do things faster. That's what we also offer. It took Pipistrel a long time to become successful. It took many companies in Slovenia that we would think of today as being awesome, a longer time. And we can actually compress that because we have more money available, more help available. We have some methodologies, which also Lean Startup is Lean Startup for a reason. You can get things done fast. So, right? So that's what the program is about, is also to show people how to do it and to give examples and good examples of people that have done it.
Thank you. So talking about education and what are schools and universities also doing in this regard? Do they have any entrepreneurship classes, any extracurricular activities? Are you familiar with that?
I can talk about the university side of things. I think a couple of things are going on. Never enough, I would say, right? It is an ongoing process also on that side. For us, it never stops kind of the building of the ecosystem bit. If nothing else, even if you have every single program you can think of in the world, you need to refresh them and figure out whether this is relevant. So, but kind of in practice, so one thing that the Ljubljana University does really well is there's this program at the School of Business and a couple of other faculties, which has the same curriculum and it's designed so it can absorb any student from any school faculty program, both bachelor's and master's stage, led by Professor Blaž-Zupan, and that brings in, let's say 150 to 200 students every year to a program where they do a month and a half, 2 months of theory, then have a startup weekend, and then from that point onwards, essentially build on top of that startup weekend idea. And first, it gives people really a lot of access to students from other fields, because it's designed, it's compulsory in a couple of faculties. So it does bring in, a mixed bag of people immediately, but then also it's open and designed to be approachable and used by anyone at any school, which is amazing. And it's always diverse, and it's working on real cases, on real problems, and multi-million euro companies have come out of that. Several. Where people, have a good idea, develop it a bit further, get a good grade at the end, because it's not about an exam, it's about the effort you put in, because entrepreneurship is about effort. How many interviews you've had and so on. It's not about, a pass-fail. It's about, well, have you done everything you could? And then that's a good grade. Right. So also, if you're like me and looking for a way to have not as many exams as you would otherwise at university, this is a great one to pick. But also because, don't laugh too much. Creativity comes out of laziness oftentimes. This is one that I would really, really put forward and encourage any students that might be listening to think about, because the program is really good. You work on specific real world cases, and actual companies have come out of it, and you get to meet mentors and people and investors and so on. And then in addition to that, universities have incubators like us. We come in and talk to students, and we do other programs and so on. So on the university level, there are quite a few things that are done very well. There are many things that are, missing, and it's our role and everybody's joint role to build those out, right? There, of course, could be funding available, especially that's a big gap that's not really there. And there are quite a few competitions. We do the Rector's Award, which is, a student idea competition, a little bit like POPRI, but it's very much for students, a little bit more developed ideas, some things that are, almost going into business already, where we have categories for students and researchers, and then a special category for impact ideas. And similar things are being done in one way or another at other universities. However, it's not enough yet. Our goal certainly is that every student, at least a couple of times throughout their studies, hears about entrepreneurship as an option, knows at least a little bit, like knows at least one person they can turn towards. Because that's often crucial, is having one contact. And then it's a small ecosystem. Everybody knows everybody. So if you don't need my support, but somebody else's, I can probably make that link, and I will very happily do so. And it's a very intertwined ecosystem. So I think quite a lot is being done, but certainly more could and should be, especially on building the mindset and giving people inspiration to even think about this.
Talking about the ecosystem, what are some actors in that? What are some organizations, individuals, let's say? Okay, so we've mentioned some incubators, accelerators, and so on. Are there any others, like, let's say, business angels, VC, stuff like that?
Yeah. When we talk about the financial side, how do we have a section in SEI where we call it financing your ideas, which basically where do I get money to finance things? And there's a nice graph that we usually show, which I think everybody shows. And it shows, at the beginning, where do you get your money? And then as you go along, where do you get money? Because usually when you ask students, you say, well, where'd you go for money? You have this great idea. Where are you going to go? I go to the bank. No bank is going to give you money, my friends. It's not going to happen. And the reason why is because you're too high risk, and the likelihood of you paying it back is about zero. Because they know that the success rate of startups is very low. They will not do it. They will give it to your parents, somebody who has a regular job at the ministry or something like that, because they know they're going to get X amount of money per month. They're going to be able to pay off the mortgage, no problem. With you, it's unclear. It's unclear. So basically, we say to them, okay, now how do you think about finance? And where do you get money? And of course, one of the places that you go to get money within Slovenia is at different types of organizations. Obviously, some of the incubators also offer access to investors. They will have to offer pitching sessions, and the investors will sit there and say, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm kind of interested to invest in that. So that's a way of getting investors, the individual investors. But then there are, of course, groups of people like Business Angels of Slovenia, which are investing at the angel level, which is a relatively low amount of money. But at the beginning, that's kind of what you need, so-called pre-seed probably, and maybe seed. When you get up to higher levels, of course, then you get into venture capital, and there are a few of those in Slovenia as well. So basically, there are different organizations who can help you, for example, to finance your ideas at different stages. And that is, of course, helped by the different organizations that are around, whether that's an incubator or a technology park or whatever. They will, give you access to those things, access to people that can help you. In terms of other people that can help you, we talked about different people. Obviously, Ljubljana, there's different incubators. There's Sežana, there's, Catapult, there's obviously out in Maribor as well, Motovana Podjemo, and so on. So there's a lot of people out there who can help you and will help you if you need help. And as Jakob said, it's quite a small ecosystem. So if you know one person, they can probably introduce you to another person who can help you find the right person. So I would say, in this case, vezem poznanstvo, as they say in Slovenia. So your connections can also be extremely helpful.
If I can add one more thing, I think that the most crucial person for someone that has an interest in entrepreneurship in an elementary or high school is the teacher. That's another one person that I think that's very crucial in this process. Because if you have a teacher that has, as you said, some connections due to its quite small ecosystem, it is maybe the first person that will introduce you to someone or will give you help in this. So I think that the teachers, and there should be more let's say, entrepreneurial mindset in teachers, and let them know to get each other. So basically our idea it's to create like a POPRI, let's say, group of teachers that are very interested in those topics and that will encourage young people in the early stages of education. Yeah.
Generally speaking, Slovenia has quite a lot of support. Also, in some fields, too much, I'd argue, even though it's something that's absolutely not in our interest as the incubator, but in certain fields, like, the average Slovenian startup has too many mentors, all paid by the government to give conflicting opinions. which then don't help the startup at the end of the day. So, and that money could be spent better elsewhere, because we do have fields. I mean, I'm not against mentorship, far from it. It's an essential part of what a startup is. But we've come to a point where we've got a whole industry of professional or semi-professional mentors who only do that. And I think that's, really gone too far. Whereas at the same time, we are the second last in the EU in venture capital per GDP, right? And there's this disconnect between we're doing a lot of too much of something, and then really not at all much in another field. And all of that should be balanced, right? We should have a healthy balance, understanding that it is very much a pyramid. You need to have quite a few incubators. We do have many, right? In total, we have 6 startup incubators and about 20 odd entrepreneurship incubators where, even slightly less innovative ideas can get support. And that's great, right? And those are 2 different things and 2 different beasts that should be supported differently. Somebody who wants to go global and international needs one type of support and one type of mentor. And somebody who wants to create a bakery, and the best bakery in, I don't know, Celje. I'm from Celje. No, I can, we need more bakeries there, I guess. That's also a great business idea and a lovely career, and they should also get support. And those need different kinds of support, but also, in the pure startup ecosystem, the really super ambitious people, there are other things that are missing. Just what we have, and with a lot of mentorship and so on, isn't enough. We do have grants from the government, which is also good. The P2 system is excellent, right? P2, for those who might not be familiar with it, is up until now the government gave 40 startups 54,000 euros of free money, right? A grant. The selection process is really well done and so on. And the whole program nothing's perfect, but it's very good, right? And now it's transforming into slightly fewer companies, 30 go into 75,000 euros. And that's even better, right? Because they'll have, it's a bit inflation adjusted. You can do with 75 what you could have done with 54 a couple of years ago. And that's all fine, but there is more that's needed, especially on fostering private investment into the space. Both, the taboo topics of tax breaks for investment and in direct support for funds being established, which will then support the overall ecosystem. And here, Slovenia was actually a trailblazer in the region 12, 15 years ago, when Slovenia was launching the first venture capital funds. It was the only one. Austria was doing a little bit, Hungary was doing nothing, Czech Republic was doing something, and nothing in Southeastern Europe, right? And we could have been a capital epicenter of a massive region of almost 100 million people, right? And because there was not enough understanding of how the process works, and the first funds will very likely not be extremely successful, but that there should be persistence also on the government side in knowing this is the right thing, because it works everywhere, it works globally, right? And yes, we know that the first ones will probably not return all of the money, even though they actually did, right? Just maybe not as fast as they were expected to, but there should be support. And we then missed the train, and that's why there was a crop of companies kind of from 2015 to 2020, where most of the very ambitious Slovenian startups were either incorporated in Bulgaria or in Croatia, because there were funds there that were scouting here actively, because we do have a very good ecosystem, right? And, kind of the understanding also on the decision maker level is very, very important, right? We understand the risk on the government side and that they can't do just anything, but it's better to do things. It's better not to do things than to do them badly in this space, because one thing that's very, very important to understand is in the startup space, we are competing with every other country in the world, right? And we need to be mindful of that. And also on the startup side, this isn't to scare people away. It's just to tell them, look, if you want to build something super ambitious, you should understand that you're competing with, a comparable person in China or the US or whatever. And that's okay. You're competing with people. And there is a lot of support, to summarize, but it should be a little bit more balanced in Slovenia as to what kind of support is offered.
Yeah. People tend to think of the United States as being and we were probably the start of the venture capital movement. It started in the United States, and it came out of people who had founded their own companies, made a ton of money, and went, I want to invest this into companies like the one I started. So a lot of venture capital came out of the people who were founders and made a lot of money, and then went, iterate, do it again. So we had a lot of money available, so-called venture capital, within the United States, non-government in large measure. And because of the success of those startups. So money was generated and then put back into the system, and it kept going through and so on. And there was an understanding, I think, obviously many years ago already, that within Europe, the venture capital situation was just simply not very good. There just wasn't a lot of money available to fund startups. And the question was, okay, should the government step in and help this? And so that's what's been going on. There's been a lot more government support within Europe and within Slovenia as well to get venture capital and this moving, because there's an understanding that this is high risk. This is risky. This is not something that's going to be funded by your average bank. So can we sort of speed up this process? Can we get this moving? And so as Jakob has pointed out, that's now been moving in Slovenia and in Europe in general. Across Europe, there's been the rise. There's been a number of venture funds which have been funded many times by governments, many times supported in part by governments, in part by entities like the European Investment Fund and so on. And now this is also taking off in Slovenia and other places for a number of different kinds of funds, venture funds, and also deep tech funds and so on. So there is support for it. So that means that now there is more money available within Slovenia as well, and there will be a new VC fund which will be sort of addressing this so-called funding gap, which is once you get to a certain stage in Slovenia, you just didn't have money available. From this about 500,000 to 3 million, no money available. So all Slovenian startups were having to go ask other people for money, whether in Bulgaria, Croatia, Luxembourg, Germany, wherever, or sometimes they leave and go to the US. So the point was, how do you support the development of startups? How do you get them the money they need? And in many cases, this is something that we've had to do. It's gone a little bit differently than the situation in the United States. It's been a little bit more government directed.
Okay. We talked about the findings from different countries and how they compare to Slovenia a little bit. Let's now dive deeper into this and explore student entrepreneurship worldwide. The USA, Europe, Israel, India, China, and so on. So, what are some best practices around the world? What is state of the art in terms of policy making, in terms of ecosystems in some other countries?
If I can say something, I didn't mention before that basically our competition, it's also international, but you did. Basically, we connect 10 countries from the Adriatic Union region, and the high school category and the students category, the ones that win the national competition, do go to the international one. Last year, we've been to Sarajevo, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and what I've found very interesting is that also the European Commission, it's very interested in stuff like that. So in startups, in money, and it is really nice to see that also all the other 10 countries that connect us in this international competition do have like a very similar system, that they do subscribe already young people in different competitions and get to know them about entrepreneurship and skills like that. That is for me very interesting, and I was really proud that we also in Slovenia do it like that. Yeah.
Slight off topic here, sorry, Frank. We talked a little bit about kind of the government support and so on. It's not something we should rely on, but it is very important, because only the government can make a decision of where do we want to go, right? And how do we support that over time goal, vision, whatever you call it,
Catalyst.
right? Yeah, exactly. And it's this kind of decision that was made on the European level, how much of that is actually efficient, so on, can be a whole debate. But it's important that the decision has been made. Europe has a certain direction now when it comes to innovation, right? And this is something that we're lacking here in Slovenia, absolutely. Even though we have, this mission statements and smart specialization strategies and I don't know what, but very little of that is actually in any way, shape, or form practical. And the government's role here is to give a listen to what's going on in the actual ecosystem. And then, coming back a little bit to your topic, is I think the best practice is for us, for the ecosystem, to also listen to people we want to target. One thing that we've started to do, and we haven't had enough impact, so I will say this here kind of as a call to action, is if somebody wants to build an entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship related community of any sort, come to us. We'll give you space for free. We'll give you support, because I don't know, and I'm not arrogant enough to think that I know what people need. But if people come and say, well, we want to build a community of gamers and building games, which has happened about 6 months ago, a group of people approached us and said, can we have gaming hackathons in your space? I said, yeah, of course, use it for free. This is why we exist, right? And out of those kind of naturally born communities is where then companies end up happening. And so I think this is the best practice that I would put forward. And then also, yes, you've got really successful programs in all sorts of universities and schools and so on, but those cannot be transplanted, one for one here. We need to see what's actually going on and what makes sense for this, and kind of use those as inspiration.
Yeah, I'd like to make another point, which is, and I agree with what Jakob's saying 100%. And I would also like to say that often the government catalyzes then private investment, because none of these funds that are being set up are going to be solely government money. They're going to be catalyzing private money to also come in and to give things back. And we have examples of that within Slovenia, certainly, funds that were started by founders for founders and so on. But we also have those that are being catalyzed at much larger amounts of money that will also involve private investors as well. So we're catalyzing, this and involving people into the system. But on the other side, what we were talking about is a little bit of the comparison between systems in the United States, for example, and Slovenia or Europe in general. And one of the things that everybody loves to talk about is, of course, the Silicon Valley ecosystem. It's the one everybody knows and everybody's impressed by, and we all think it's very cool. But of course, it grew up around Stanford University, which is a top university. It is probably one of the, I don't know if it's ranked number one right now, but it's usually in the top three. And the main point being that, universities, and therefore students and professors and the people that are teaching them, so this is an academic environment largely, has been the catalyst as well. So it's not just money. It's also education and academic success and so on has catalyzed the creation of many innovative startups that then have grown to become what we see today as companies we all know. Now, whether that's, and these are many American companies, of course, and that's Google and Apple and Amazon and so on. And what we see from that has been that's had a tremendous impact on the economy. The 5 top, stocks in the United States are those 5, effectively, so-called FANG. So, and these are things that have grown out often of academic environments and so on, and that's where students are, and students and professors come together, and so that is something that you do have here, and you do have in Europe in general as well. So you may not have Stanford, but you have ETH, you have the University of Ljubljana has 40,000 students. That's not a small number. And if we'd put all the other, universities together, we get to a high number as well. It's a small place, right? By comparison with the US.
Yeah, and here there's a really, really important point, which is universities are designed to put smart people together. And kind of encourage serendipitous meetings and little conversations that might lead nowhere, most likely will lead nowhere, but if enough of them happen, some of them will lead somewhere, and those somewheres will be very successful at the end of the day. And another point kind of from combining what I said earlier and what Charlotte just mentioned, Silicon Valley actually, yes, it was private investment that really spurred venture capital. However, the reason why Silicon Valley is where it is was because basically NASA decided that this is where they want to do most of their stuff. And because that brought brilliant engineers and people from all over the US into one relatively confined place with good quality of life. And there's a parallel here to Slovenia. Like, we've got great quality of life, a lot of brilliant people. So let's connect them better, right? And have a vision of what we want to do, and then things will happen.
Exactly. And I'll just add to that and say, we shouldn't neglect the role of government in creating a good environment. And I think we're moving on to this in a little bit, but let's step into it here since Jakob opened it up. Is that the government has a role to create an environment which is, encourages whatever it wants to encourage, and to create a better environment. And this can be, a better business environment. It can be a better investment environment. It can be a better entrepreneurial environment, whatever you want. And what Jakob pointed out is also that it's a massive investment by the US government in research and development, particularly in that particular case into NASA, but into a variety of different fields. We have a number of different national labs and things like that, a little bit beyond student entrepreneurship. But, at the end of the day, a lot of, U.S. government money for research and development does go through the universities. And some of that is more basic and some of that is more applied. And that also is where students get this experience through government-funded grants that directs what you do. Now, if suddenly the government, as it's doing right now with the Inflation Reduction Act, says we want to, really support green technologies and get renewable energy moving and so on, and the money's going into that, well, guess where students and their professors are going to be directing their efforts. So there is a role for the government in directing.
Before we step into the vision part a bit more, let's list some examples. So in Europe, we often speak about Estonia or maybe the Netherlands. Jakob, you spent a year in Edinburgh. Are there some examples in Europe which is maybe more comparable to Slovenia than to Silicon Valley? Do we have any good examples, or in the region perhaps, of any good policies, any good ecosystem changes? Because not everything can come from the government. It can also come from private institutions and so on.
Estonia, that you mentioned, it's kind of comparable, sure. Had, in my view, two kind of key moments. One was a little bit of luck, and the other, you always need that, by the way, and the other was very directed decision on the government level, but with really broad buy-in from the populace. The first one was Skype, right? Skype was founded by non-Estonians, but in Estonia, because it had, cheaper engineering than Sweden, I believe, where the main founder is from. And that became super successful. And, there's this called Skype mafia in Estonia, which is a real thing, a lot of, not in a mafia sense, but kind of a lot of people coming out of one company who made money, who learned what it actually means to build a globally significant company. And that's one of the main reasons why, Estonia, which, I love Estonians, and I have quite a few friends there, but it was very much a Soviet backwater in the 90s, right? And this kind of brought in a completely fresh mindset, and people said, well, actually, from Estonia, you can make things that are relevant, that are big, that everybody knows. And then the second bit was their decision to become the most kind of digital native country on the planet. And that was essentially what I like to call, to make an entrepreneurial analogy, every business needs a business model, and every country needs a sort of business model. What is the country, right? And Estonia decided we need to change things because they did have quite a lot of trouble prior to this shift. And we want to be super digitized and super open and super, interconnected. And when I was at Edinburgh, I had a roommate in the same house who was Estonian, and I was shocked by the fact that she could vote in her national election from Edinburgh by putting her ID card into her laptop. Like, there was a slot in her laptop, she slid it in and, voted in the, government elections or whatever. And that was incredibly impressive. And this was 2013, right? It was 10 years ago that it did this. And because Estonia decided, yeah, this is what we do. And then suddenly Estonia became known for something, right? And they became known for something which was business related enough that it enabled so many businesses to open there. And with this kind of a digital e-residency and so on, so many companies from the Western Balkans, where I used to spend quite a bit of time, are incorporated in Estonia because it's actually easier for a person from Sarajevo to incorporate in Estonia than it is in Bosnia and Herzegovina, unfortunately, but that's just how it is, right? And that's what was Estonia's conscious decision, that this is what we want to be, right? They didn't do all sorts of things. They did one thing and did it pretty well, right? And it was the right thing at the right time. So that was kind of, asking about Estonia, what I see as key developments.
Thank you. So now we can step into a bit of the vision for Slovenia moving forward. When creating a vision for further development and improvement of, let's say, youth entrepreneurship in Slovenia, we must consider the existing state. And we've done that. We took a look into the ecosystem, into policy and everything like that. So now let's say, what are some good things? What are some things that should be kept the same? What are we doing well? Because we've mentioned that, of course, not everything is bad. I think Slovenia is still a pretty good country to start a venture in, let's say. So yeah, where do we have a competitive advantage? Where are we doing well?
If I can start, I think that the supports that the government and even in some parts some private organizations do give at the early stages of education. So as we've talked before about it, the first chance for people that go to elementary school to have a chance to try some entrepreneurial skills or stuff like that. That's for me one good point. One thing that I would also mention is that we should do it more systematically, as I've also mentioned before. But it's making some progress, yeah. And I hope that I say we because I mean incubators and organizations that do support the startup ecosystem should step together to get a bigger impact on, as I said before, the early stages of the entrepreneurial skills, and that we give the support at the beginning of the schooling system.
A positive point that I can think of in my experience over SEI over the years is what we talked about at the beginning, which is the entrepreneurial mindset. I think that of these students I've seen, and I've seen about 250 go through the program since then, so about 20, 25 a year, there has been a change. There has definitely been a change, and a positive one, I would like to say that. And that's been my observation, but I think it's been observed in the data as well. And that is that people are definitely willing to consider, starting a startup. And when we did a survey a couple of years ago, we said, to all of our 200, I think at the time, we said, hey, have you worked for a startup or have you started your own startup? What's the percentage? And of the people that answered, 30% said yes. No, of course, how does that translate over 250? But nevertheless, 30% said, yes, I've worked for a startup or I've started my own startup. And that's pretty good. And a lot of them were the more recent ones that were answering. So it's definitely going up. So I would say that's a very positive thing. And I think that's a very positive point of all the work that's been done in the ecosystem, whether, through programs like POPRI, whether through Ljubljana Universitetni Incubator and the other people that have been working in the ecosystem. These are incremental changes that have occurred over time. And now we're seeing it. It's visible. And I think that's very positive.
Yeah. There are a couple of points where Slovenia is really great. Yeah. We have incredible talent. It's quite concentrated and accessible, right? And we have an excellent education system. We speak languages very much above average, right? Especially English. And we should use we should play to our strengths. So what are our strengths? Kind of geopolitically, we're a small nation, which means that kind of from an entrepreneurial point of view, that forces ambitious companies to go international immediately. And that's a very good thing, because we don't have the fallacy of a decent sized market, which, for instance, Poland, Italy, even Germany have.
And the US?
The US, well, the US is big enough, right?
Yeah.
Whereas
US
US is 330 million people, and it's the biggest economy in the world, and so on. But looking at a country like I've been to many startup events in Poland, for example. Most companies say we will do Poland first and then go international. But that's so often too slow if you're doing something really, really internationally significant. You have to go into the best possible market, not your home market. Maybe do a bit of testing, sure, so you know what you're talking about. But then the step 0.2 should be going international. And that's something that Slovenian startups have to do. And that's a big advantage, right? And it's also the size of the country is great because it's very easy to get to people, right? It's everybody knows everybody is a good thing, right? So the fact that you can check on a new employee because you have mutual friends is excellent, because also getting people is good, because it's not that veze in poznanstva, connections and so on it can be an asset if it's not abused, right? And that's a very important point. So those are certainly our strengths. We're incredibly well positioned as a gateway between cultures, between different regions of Europe. We're both Central European, we're both Southeastern European. We have a border with the Romance language group, with a Germanic group, and so on. So it's very much a crossroads. And historically, that has been a defining trait, and it will be. You cannot escape your geopolitics, but you can use it as an advantage. And we are EU members. We have the euro, so we're very much European. But at the same time, we're a gateway to certain markets that are very interesting for a lot of businesses, but they, even international business cannot reach them. But we can much more readily than others. So things like that are kind of really broad advantages, but then also very specific things, like we have a lot of incubators. Anybody who has an idea can get an incubator to support them 100%. So if you want to do something, if you're ambitious, there is an incubator out there to support you. I absolutely stand behind that, right? If you don't get in, maybe something's wrong with your idea, right? Consider also that possibility. It's in the startup and entrepreneurship space, it's a very small ecosystem. So it's very easy to get to the right person. I don't agree that you need to talk to somebody to introduce you to a person who can help you out. Find the right person. I think everybody knows everybody enough that, if you come to anyone, they can direct you to the right person immediately. And that's a big, big, big advantage, right? But
you have to get to that circle.
Oh, yeah, of course. You need to knock on a door. You need to send an email. And if somebody doesn't reply, you need to follow up, right? It's all about being persistent, right? Playing to our strength. Persistence certainly is a big, big, big strength in the kind of Slovene national character. I think we have so many good ingredients. And the general trend I've observed in a slightly different way, the same thing as you have mentioned, Charlotte. To tell a story, I was a couple of years ago at the matura dance of a prominent gymnasium here in Ljubljana, and the talk that was given by the president of the student council or whatever the guy was. He started with, we're here sitting, coming from the same background, but then in 10 years' time, we will all have been, or, some of us will have been successful entrepreneurs and so on. But the first thing he said was entrepreneurship and successful entrepreneurs. And that was kind of the vision and the direction that those people were thinking in. And that's so very different than what I experienced, about 10 years prior when I was graduating gymnasium. So that the trend is right. The question here is whether we're moving fast enough.
Okay. So let's step into the other side of the coin. What needs to be changed or enhanced in our current ecosystem, in our state, and so on?
I can talk a little bit. I think when I talk with people in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, and you talk with startups, and you talk with people who want to start businesses, obviously one of the first things that come up is, the business environment, and from the investor point of view, it's always the taxes and things like that. So and you have to balance these things, and I'm not going to be prescriptive here and tell everybody what needs to be done, but I'm going to say that you always need to weigh up, the advantages and the disadvantages of changing one policy and making it better for one group of people, which might make it not so good for the other group of people. So there's always considerations in the sense of how do you make a better business environment that encourages people, and at the same time in your tax environment that will, for example, allow investors to make risky investments where they will likely lose a ton of money. But if they make money, how do you encourage that? Because they're the people that are taking the risks in many cases, and the question is, how can you encourage that? That's always a question. So can you improve that? And there are a number of things that are going on. And I know that there have been different groups of people talking with various ministries and saying, hey, can you please make this better for us as either investors into startups and into the entrepreneurship ecosystem, or as startups themselves, have also some demands on how to change certain things. And that's definitely going on within Slovenia. So there is lobbying to improve some aspects. I'll say that's one thing. I won't go into the prescriptives very much, but this is what one hears when you talk with different people. So that's one thing. And I would say also, and I think I can seek into this just a tiny bit, although it's not directly on student entrepreneurship, it is a little bit. The U.S. Embassy will be supporting a program, an IVLP program, a single country program, to show U.S. models of technology transfer at our academic research institutions, to show key people within Slovenia at the universities, at the ministries, at the various research institutions, and also among the financial institutions. How do we do things in the States to basically incentivize, for example, people within the universities or within research institutions, if they have a great idea, to not just publish or perish, but deploy or die, to quote MIT, which has a very strong support for not just academic research and high-level research at that, but also taking ideas and getting them out of the lab and commercializing them. And how do you do that? How do we take those good ideas? And many of those good ideas are going to come from students as well. That's something to consider. So, how do you create within your total system, not just on the financial side and taxes and a business environment and so on, but also within your institutions, whether they're research institutions or universities or whatever, how do you create a good environment where people with good ideas will have the incentive to make them happen, to make startups in a risky area, whether it's quantum computing or whatever. I mean, these are very up and coming topics that we're all hearing about in the news, artificial intelligence, whatever you want. How do you create this incentive structure? And hopefully, this program will show how we've been doing that in the United States a little bit. And it's not to say you can copy paste from the U.S. to here. This does not work. You can't copy paste startup nation Israel either. Slovenia has its own particular things, but you can take some good examples and say, yes, we could do that here. And the question is, what are those things? And can we show and say, here, this has worked here. Maybe this might work for you. Give it a go, or look and see how you could do that here. And that, at the end of the day, is a way that we could make some improvements within the system.
Yeah, I'll be a bit more specific and say there's so many things that are just silly. Like, why do they exist? For instance, what are we encouraging with the fact that essentially the only metric that matters in science is the number of publications? What are we encouraging there? Imagine, I'm looking forward to the day where a piece of IP will be sold for €1 million and there'll be 50 authors on it and they'll all get nothing, because then things will change. Because actually it was 2 or 3 people, or maybe even just one, but then everybody else just tacked on because they need publication for RRS. That's silly. Like, why do we do that? Why are we encouraging this kind of behavior? Because it really is, like, if we want to have great science, and I think we should, we have very, very good science, but in order to have great science, we should encourage incredible publications, not just the sheer number and volume of publications. It's just one thing. And also another thing, kind of very much from the startup space. In Slovenia requires foreign investors to obtain potrdilo o nekaznovanosti, so a kind of the proof that they are not in kind of any litigation or criminal charges or whatever. And that doesn't exist in certain jurisdictions. So in order to get investment from a US investor, for instance, they need to get proof from the FBI, which doesn't do that, right? So so you're essentially blocking certain geographies from investing into Slovenia because somebody said, let's just add potrdilo nekaznovanosti onto requirements for foreign investors. And that's silly. Like, why? Whom did they consult before they made that decision? Right? And the answer is nothing. Nobody. Somebody had an idea and just did it without thinking of the repercussions. And it's things like this that are just silly, which don't make any sense. Like, if you want to be a competitive economy, maybe the question is, do we want to be a competitive economy? My opinion is that yes, we do want to be that, because otherwise we'll end up being a museum in 20 years' time, and nobody wants that. You can't live off the quality of life. You need to have something to have a quality life. And then, what was introduced was what the startup community has been pushing for is easier employment of foreigners. And that's incredibly difficult in Slovenia. And there's so much red tape, and, bureaucracy is just endless. And so people just don't do it, right? And what that ends up meaning is that instead of attracting really, really brilliant people to come here, we are then prioritizing employment from abroad into areas like construction and so on, which is okay. We need people from all walks of life. But, right, let's just overall make it simpler, because Slovenia is a growing economy. Fortunately, we're one of the very few in Central Eastern Europe which has a growing population, right? So let's encourage what we're already good at. Let's play to our strengths. We're an attractive destination. And if we want to continue being an attractive destination, we should make it easier to be so, and to also support the kind of companies that make it into an attractive destination for work, and then also the quality of life that we're so proud of, and we should be.
Okay, great. So what should be the priorities? Where should we start? Who must be involved in this so we move forward and improve?
I think we've mentioned most of the people that are going to be involved. It's when I first came to Slovenia on the Fulbright scholarship, and I was working on my lovely monograph, was basically on science and technology policy, on technology transfer. And what you realize at the end of the day is it's a systems issue. There's not one thing you can do or one group of people. You have to have a lot of things that will go in the right direction. It has to be your universities have to be on board, that yes, this is important. We want to encourage, people to start their own companies, and not just, publish papers, for example. And that's true of the research institutions as well. I mean, that's one aspect. Then there's the legal aspect. Are you protecting intellectual property in a certain way? Are you doing this? Your business environment, your tax system and everything else, is that, set up optimally maybe, for this, and so on. So it's actually a systems issue that you start looking at. And there are many, many different things that are going on. Are you able to finance these things? Do you have, venture capital available, and so on and so forth? So this is a whole system that we're talking about here so there's no one answer, number one. And I think we all agree on that. We're all coming from different places. And that's true in the United States as well. We've created certain, incentive structures in different universities and in tax structures and the business environment and so on. And you have to make those decisions, and then it will improve, or hopefully, right? How everything goes in that direction. But it's not a one. There's no one answer, and it's not just from one side. And it also has to take into account what you as a society want as well. If you prioritize one thing, are you deprioritizing another? And how do you balance these things a little bit? And luckily, it's a small country, in a nice way. It's a more manageable number. When you're dealing with hundreds of millions, it gets a little scary because it's big. But when you're dealing with 2 million, you can at least, it's manageable and you can think about it. You know who the people are that you're actually affecting and what you might be able to do that would be best. So it's a manageable system, I would say that as well, even though it has a number of players.
The key thing that Slovenia should decide is, what do we want to be as a country? Do we want to be super entrepreneurial, or do we not want to be super entrepreneurial, right? Do we want to have incredible quality of life or not? Or do we want to, support the ongoing business and invest a ton of government subsidies into manufacturing plants that will become obsolete in due time, right? The thing is, we need to have a plan as a country, because we are competing with other countries. As I mentioned before, Estonia at one point made a conscious decision that their business model will be the most digital country in the world, certainly in Europe. And they've executed very well on that. And the whole country knew what they were doing, right? It's like in a company, if you don't have a vision, it's much more difficult to make decisions, because a vision is telling you at any decision-making point, you can gauge whether you're going into the direction of the vision or not. And then it makes it easier to decide. And even if you make a sidestep, you know why, and it's reasonable. And then, for instance, a lot of countries have decided what their thing is. Especially small ones have to do this, because big ones can do a lot of things. Small ones have to do one, maybe two things really well, right? And another example would be Luxembourg, which decided they want to be the fund management center of the world. And they happened to become that in about only 25 years, which in a country's sense is not a lot. Like Ireland decided they want to become the hub for international corporations, their footprint in Europe. And they've executed brilliantly on that. And that's only about 15 years old. They only decided this after the Great Recession, right? So these things don't take as much time as it may seem, right? It's, 10, 15 years before this happens. Which just as a country, we need to decide, what do we want, right?
I would just like to bring up another point, which people don't generally associate with the United States. First of all, I agree. But I think it's becoming more and more apparent that we have to think about climate change and the environment and everything around us. And that also has to be a major focus for everyone. And in the United States, this has really happened, as I said before, with the Inflation Reduction Act and the money moving into green tech and renewable energy and so on. But sustainability is key. And I mean sustainability in the broader sense, both in the sense of, how do we prevent climate change and all that kind of thing, and prevent biodiversity loss and all these things. But I think this is also a key point that we're going to have to start integrating into everything we do. But at the same time, it's an opportunity. I'd like to point out it's a massive opportunity, because we don't know. How do you do carbon capture and storage in an energy efficient way? Nobody's got this one figured out, my friends. We're all talking about hydrogen. There's no great, perfect, lovely answer as to how we're going to do green hydrogen. We know we should do it with renewable energy and so on, but how do we exactly do it is the question. These are major questions which are open. These are challenges that are open right now. This is something students are going to be on the cutting edge of, because they care about the environment. If Greta has shown us anything, it's that. But it's not just Greta, it's everybody. And this is the student group that we're talking about right now. And somebody sitting across from me who's in that group, Frank. And I think that this is opening a massive opportunity for everyone to employ their entrepreneurial skills to solving this massive issue that we're all facing. And I think that when we look at where we want to go directionally, and this is why 4 years ago at SEI, I introduced sustainable business concepts. Okay, why am I doing that in an introductory entrepreneurship course, especially an American one? Come on, you guys aren't very green. When the answer is, we have a lot of people in the United States who are very green. We do. We've got massive things like that. And the question is, how do you integrate that into business? And that's a great challenge. And that is something where Slovenia is awesome. Everybody thinks of Slovenia. Slovenia has been selling itself as green for years, right? sunny side of the Alps and green and so on. And I think there's people care about nature, people care about the environment here. And that is a major plus. I'm getting to the point slowly. It's a major plus that people care about nature. You're close to nature. Even in the city, we can all go running on Golovec and Rožnik or wherever. We're close. Primorska even more so probably. And Celje, again, wherever you're from. And I think that also is something you can catalyze. It's a very positive aspect of Slovenia that you can catalyze to drive things forward, because people do care. And if you hit on things that people care about, they will be ambitious, they'll take risks, they'll employ their creativity towards doing something they care about. And I think that also is a majorly positive point about Slovenia. And it is a direction where certainly I think Slovenia can take people. Is it going to be the leader? Maybe not. Okay, it's a small country, that's difficult. But as a major contributor, absolutely. The answer is absolutely. And education and the high level of PhDs that you have here and research institutions and so on will definitely be able to contribute, and that's very positive. And I think that is something when we talk about making policies, very positive. I'll stop now.
Okay, so slowly wrapping up, is there something anyone out there perhaps listening to this podcast could do to support the startup ecosystem in Slovenia as an individual?
Really depends on who they are. And everybody has a role to play. Whether they're a decision maker in any capacity, they can encourage whoever they affect that it's okay to be ambitious and entrepreneurial, and it's okay to try and fail, right? Without trying, we'll never get anywhere, right? If there anyone thinking about potentially becoming an entrepreneur, give it a shot, right? The worst thing you can do, especially if you're young and a student or something like that, is spend time on actually getting a lot of experience, outsized amounts of experience compared to what you would out of a 6-month course of any sort. If you build a company for 6 months, I think you learn a lot more for whatever you end up doing then in life, right? So it really depends. Think about how you can support, and then be open and think of all the things that were said today, right? That this kind of the mindset is really crucial, and that we think before we say, because what we say really impacts how people end up thinking, right? Especially for people who have children. If they come up with an idea, don't dismiss it, encourage it, right? And let them learn. And so that's a super important thing. We often today we talked a lot about youth entrepreneurship in schools and so on, but it starts at home, right? I hate it when parents complain that schools don't do enough for kids to be entrepreneurial. You do it, right? It starts, and then the school will be, and then the kids will encourage the school, and enough parents will encourage the school, and so on, and then it gets the ball rolling. This is all very circular, the snowball rolls and it becomes bigger, it goes down the hill, and we've had enough success in Slovenia now. They have an understanding of how it's done. We have people that have done it, have walked the path of all sorts of entrepreneurship, from tiny excellent bakeries to companies selling their things to billions, literally billions of people globally, right? So we know how it's done, and it's easy to get to these people. So just how to encourage it and how not to be too, putting down ideas a little bit too early because we didn't really think about it.
Thank you. So, to wrap up, what is one thing that you would like to say to any aspiring young entrepreneurs at the end of this episode?
Think with your own mind, be creative, and be passionate. Do not, if there is something that you're passionate about, do not let it go for any chance.
Be ambitious, don't be afraid to take a risk, and ask for advice. Everybody likes being asked for advice, and they'll be very willing to help you. And the best excuse if you're a student is, I'm doing this for university.
Exactly. I think it's just try it. Give it a go. That's it. I think that's basically what everything we're saying boils down to. Just give it a try. You've got people around you that can help you. You've got money available. You've got a support structure. I would say this, perhaps we should let people try things. That's also leaving people alone. Not so top-down, controlling kind of thing. Just as and this is in family and so on. It's just say, hey, give it a go. Give it a try. And don't just go, no, I don't think that's going to work. That's a silly idea. Try it. See if it works, and give whomever the freedom to do that in the knowledge that they also have a lot of support behind them if they need it.
Great, thank you. Dear guests, dear listeners, thank you for being with us and for listening.